In this video, I'm going to show you 5 more super practical techniques to make your type look great in any motion graphics project. These are some more of my go-to techniques to add something interesting or solve a problem using type. The first is to get your type looking rough. If your type is a bit too clean and your client needs something a bit more rustic, here's how to do that quickly. With our type layer selected, we're going to add the effect Roughen Edges, which immediately sort of knocks about the edges of our type. And we're going to change a few things. We're just going to change its border up here from 8 down to 4. So the roughen isn't digging as deep into our type as it was, and it looks a bit more hand-drawn. And to animate this, we can open up our evolution options, find random seed, alter option click, and add the simple expression time *4. And what that does is it changes the random seed value, which determines what is deforming where, and changes that every 4 frames. So now when we play it back, it has a slight boiling animation, as if it was hand-drawn every 4 frames. Now to add a bit more of a detailed roughness to this, we can take our roughen edges, duplicate that effect with Ctrl+D, and we want to make this roughness a bit smaller. We want to find detailed roughness around the edges. So let's lower its border from 4 down to 2, and we want to drag its scale down as well, maybe down to 20. There. Now if we're looking close, and we toggle that on and off, we can see now there's just a tiny bit of roughness on the very edge of our already rough text shapes here. And there, now we've added a little bit of personality and rustic life to this type. And if you want to add some more texture, you can grab in a scanned in image or video. I'm going to drag in this looping texture that I've previously made. You can check out my tutorial for that on this channel. And making sure that's above our type layer, we are going to select our type and make sure the track matte is set from none and make sure it is Luma matte inverted. And if you can't find your track matte options here, you can toggle it by clicking this button down here if it's not visible for you. And now what that does is it knocks back any white areas of our texture, which you can see is a lot of dots all around the place, and it cuts that out of our text layer so we can see the gray background underneath. So now we've got a very rustic, very Texas type effect with no keyframes, animating in no time at all. Done. All right, the next effect is typewriter. Now eventually you're going to have to animate some text being written, whether it's by a person or just appearing on a screen. Now luckily there is a super handy preset for that in After Effects, and you guessed it, it's called a typewriter. But there are a few nuances to using it. If we double click, it has a type animation down here with a type animator and a range selector. Let's drag that over to our start, and we can see that our letters just start typing on. But they all type on at the same speed, and that's much too slow. Let's drag that across. When you're typing, you're not hitting a key precisely 1/8 of a second. When you type, there's little bursts and pauses when you're writing something. So to make this feel a little more natural, like someone's writing it, I like to just go in between these keyframes and just add the percentage up, or maybe add the percentage down, and play that back, and that already feels a little bit more natural. It's a little bit too slow, so let's increase the speed of a few of these by dragging them closer together. And now because there's a little bit of a pause here, it just feels a little more natural, like someone's actually typing this. And you can also use the typewriter effect to animate words one at a time. So here it has already been applied, and what we want to do is find the gap where one word has been revealed, make a keyframe there, and on the next one, add a keyframe here. We want to select all of these keyframes, right click, and select toggle hold keyframes. So now there's not going to be any in-betweening between any of these keyframes. It's just going to go 3 new words. And you can drag out these keyframes to determine when they want to animate on. Now you can also animate this on using masks or mattes, but sometimes you might be using your masks or using a matte layer on top of your type effect. So this is just another way to achieve that effect. And also if you want your type to be animated out of the center rather than from left to right, there's an easy way to do that. So you want to get your text layer. Here we've got wah. Let's open up our keyframes so we can see them. And we want to keyframe its position. At the end here, let's toggle U to make sure all our keyframes are visible. And at the very start, we want to drag this so the left edge of our type is in the very center. Let's make sure these both have the same easing at the end with F9. And now if we play it back, our wah comes out from the center, and it's centered all the way through the animation. Done. 3 ways to use a typewriter. This video is sponsored by DemoCreator from Wondershare. DemoCreator is an incredibly simple screen recording and video editing software. It lets you create tutorials and presentations as quickly as humanly possible. I'll show you just how easy it is. We want to make a quick tutorial about labeling our layers. We open up DemoCreator, select new recording. We can change any of our settings down here and select record. Let's drag this off our screen. Now we're just recording our screen at the moment, but you can record your webcam as well. And then we deliver our script in a flawless performance. All right, label our layers. We just select it down here, hit enter, and type your layer name, and then deselect it. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe. Done. Now we can stop our recording, and it'll open up the editor automatically. Now we just drag that recording into our timeline. Let's trim the start and the end. And if you need to edit out anything embarrassing from the middle, and then we just go up to export, and we're done. Tutorial made in 30 seconds. If you want to enhance your video further, you can add transitions, effects, remove green screens, add captions, annotations, and highlight your cursor as well. These are all super quick to do. DemoShare is great for creating online tutorials like I do, but also product presentations, recording feedback for your colleagues, coursework, and even game highlight recording. There is currently 20% off the annual plan, but you can use the code SENBEN10 to get an additional 10% discount, saving you even more. Check the link in the description. Now, text write-on effect. Now, you're definitely going to be asked to make some type write-on at some point in your career. And this works best with hand-drawn typefaces. I'm using the typeface Zolanti, which is from DaFont, so there's a link to that down in the description. And the first thing we need to do is add the effect stroke to our type layer. And we need to draw each stroke that this effect is going to use. And we do that with masks. So let's select our pen tool. And we're just going to click and drag and draw every stroke that we would want to make as if you were drawing this text by hand with a pen or a paintbrush. And we want each of these strokes to be a separate mask. So you might want to deselect and select again to draw every mask. And I'll speed up the process of me drawing all of these. Now you should end up with something that looks a lot like this. And you can always go in and neaten these up as well to make them more aligned with your type. You want to aim for around the middle of each stroke. Now we need to select the path that draws from all masks and make sure that stroke sequentially is set as well. And now we can see we've got a white stroke drawn over all of those masks. Now we want to increase the brush size from 2 to, well, whatever covers all of your text. So let's drag that up and see what works for us. Maybe around 12 or so. And here we can move our masks as well a bit more to make sure that covers up all of our type. This should be fine. And then we have start and end, which works a lot like trim paths to determine how much of this stroke is drawn. So if we drag the end down, we can see it draws in reverse. So we actually want this to draw on like that. So let's keyframe it at 0 at the beginning of wherever we want our animation. And then where we want it to finish, drag that up to 100. So now we get what looks like a bit of a ride-on effect, but with that stroke. So we want to change the paint style from on original image to reveal original image. So now it is going to work like a matte, and that stroke is going to draw on our text. Now you can see at some points, like we've got here, our stroke makes visible our next stroke that we're going to draw. So we can select our mask, maybe add another point in the middle there, and drag that up so it doesn't cover the next line that we're about to draw, and reveal it, giving us some spoilers of the lines that are about to be drawn next. Now sometimes that's unavoidable, like we've got on the X here, because it's coming out of both sides. And just know that there's no real way that you can avoid this without maybe using a matte layer on top of this, but most of the time, no one's going to really notice if it's very small. And it really helps to use a typeface where there's less contrast between the strokes, where all the lines are a consistent width like this one. Let's easy ease that, and now we've got a nice ride-on type effect. The next technique is to do with text visibility. Sometimes you've got some great footage, which looks awesome when you've got type over the top. Everything's visible and everyone's happy. And then sometimes you're given footage where there's a lot of contrast, there's a lot of things happening behind your text, and your words just get lost. Now, the best solution for this would obviously be to change the footage. But often as a motion designer, you're just given footage with an edit that is locked and you're told to just make it work. So you've got to try to work a miracle without changing the design style of your type either. So here are my ways to go about making it work without making too many compromises to either the footage or the type design. But there will be compromises. So we need to separate our text from our background because they're blending in too much. So we can do that by placing something in between it. Now, the first thing I like to try is to add the effect drop shadow to our text. And I know drop shadows are a bit frowned upon, but if you increase the softness a fair bit, let's increase the opacity as well so we can see it a bit more. You can barely see that it's a drop shadow. It just adds a dark color around the edge of our type and often isn't noticeable. Now we can see that it helps a bit, but doesn't help an awful lot in this scene. There's still a lot going on behind it. So the next thing I try is to create a new solid with Control Y. Let's create it black and let's put that below our text layer and lower its transparency to maybe 20%. And that darkens up the whole background and separates the text in front. Now, often this won't work because it just, destroys all of your whites, all of your highlights become gray. But in some cases, depending on your footage, that is fine and no one will notice, especially if it's a really short shot and it's surrounded by other dark pieces of footage in the edit. If that isn't the case, you can grab your ellipse tool from over here in our toolbar and draw over that solid, creating a mask over the middle. and press F on our keyboard to bring up the mask feather and drag that out to make a nice soft gradient. And then you can increase your opacity as well on your layer to determine the darkness behind it. You don't want to go too far because the further you go, it's going to look more muddy. It will separate your text more and the text is more visible, but at the expense of the background looking nice. So you don't want to go too hard on this. You don't want to make it too obvious that what we're doing is actually what we're doing. Now, if that doesn't work, we can get rid of this black solid, get rid of our drop shadow. And this is something that the client might not go for, but if they do, I think it can work well. So I'm going to add a new adjustment layer with Control Alt or Y, and I'm going to call that blur because we always label our layers, and because we are going to add a blur to this layer. So we're going to add a Gaussian blur and crank the blur up to maybe 40. Well, let's drop that below our text layer as well. We only want to blur out the background. And select repeat edge pixels as well, so you don't get it blurring into nothing and get a bit of a black border here. Now we don't want to blur out the whole background. The client's obviously not going to go for this solution, but if we select our rectangle tool, we can draw a mask around our text. And now we get this sort of frosted glass look, where our footage is visible, but behind our text it's blurred, and we get a lot more visibility from our text here. Now this definitely is another design element that, if the client isn't expecting, might scare them, but it can work and look pretty elegant. And to make it look more deliberate, we can draw a rectangle around the whole thing, creating a new shape layer. So let's make that have no fill and give it a white stroke and just draw over our mask. So now our blurred area has a bit of a white border and it just looks more like a deliberately design element. And you can increase the blurriness as much as you want, depending on how visible you need it to be. And you can also add the tint effect from over here in our effects panel. Let's put that above our Gaussian blur. And we can just eyedrops two colors, a dark one and a light one, or a lighter one, from our footage. And we can change the amount of tint down. And then we can change the color of this section as well, if you want to add even more separation, depending on how hectic your footage is in the background. Now there's no one perfect solution, that depends on your type design and your type of footage, but these are the techniques I found that worked most of the time when I'm dealt a bad hand like this. The next technique is tracking your text into footage, and this is really quick and really easy. Let's start with just our footage in this layer, and all we need to do is add the effect 3D camera tracker. And as soon as we add that, it is going to start analyzing in the background. And this is happening in the background. So you can go into other comps, do other things, and come back to this. And After Effects is thinking all of that while. And there's a little counter in the top left that shows the percentage of time remaining. And this 5-second clip didn't take any time at all, maybe 20 seconds. And when it's done, you can see all of these tracking markers over our footage. So what we want to do is find an area which is at a similar space that we want our text to be in. So I think I want our text sort of floating over this tree. So I'm going to find a tracking marker on that tree, right click, and then choose Create Text and Camera. So now we've got a text layer here, and it's created a virtual camera. So if we play that back, our text is tracked to that tree. Now this doesn't look great, our text over there, so what we can do is increase its scale to make it bigger. And then because this is now a 3D layer, we have an option to move it in Z space as well as the Y and X that we normally have. So I'm going to drag these handles and just drag it over towards the middle. Let's put it up a bit. And we might want to move it a bit forward in Z space as well. That's up to you. And now if we play it back, we've got text tracked into our scene. Done. I hope you found this video useful, but please go ahead and download this project file. It's for free down in the description. Have a tinker around, and I'd love to see how you apply these techniques to your own work. If you'd like to learn animation and motion design techniques, I've got a playlist of some of the best tutorials on this channel for you to take a look at. I'll see you in the next one.